Shorty?
Finally over.
You okay?
Oh, where are we anyway?
India.
How do you know that?
We're going to India today. We're going up into the Himalayas or Himalayas, either, neither, neither, potato, potato, however you want to pronounce it. We're going up into Nepal and to northern India. But first, I've got a little side trip that I'd like to take to Gujarat. Gujarat is on the western side of India, and it's on a plateau called the Deccan Traps. Traps is a Swedish word, and it means steps. And these steps are a series of lava flows, one right on top of the other, so that as a practical matter, if you were to cut through the earth, it looks a little bit like a layer cake. For millions of years, there was periodically lava oozing up at this point, at the Deccan Traps. And one of the things that might have set it off was the Shiva meteorite. Now, I'm calling it the Shiva meteorite because its resulting crater is called the Shiva crater, And it's offshore. It's underwater so that you can't get any clear views of it. But there are a couple of very interesting things about it. First of all, the Deccan Traps and the Shiva crater both occurred at roughly the same time, about 65, 66 million years ago. And that coincides with when the dinosaurs were wiped out. Actually, there were probably about 3 meteoroids that hit close to 65, 66 million years ago. There's a very small one in Ukraine called the Baltish. And the larger one, the one that's usually associated with the destruction of the dinosaurs, is just off the Yucatan Peninsula, Chicxulub. However, the largest one, the one that's 500 kilometers across, that's Shiva. And Shiva should have been a really, really big impact. The shock of the meteor displaced the Carlsberg Ridge, and it initiated a rifting between India and the Seychelles. It was an oblique impact coming from the southwest and headed towards the northeast, not a direct impact on the Earth. And the result was it seems to have caused a sudden northward acceleration of the Indian plate. The Deccan Traps and the Shiva crater. Remember those because we're coming back to them. One other thing about Gujarat is that that's where the Gir Forest is. The Gir Forest is the only place in the world where you can find Asiatic lions. Now, Asiatic lions are not exactly like African lions. In fact, there's a separate subspecies, although they're the same species. And one way you know that they're not quite the same is because if you cross an Asiatic lion with an African lion, the cubs are not likely to turn out right. Nevertheless, it's the Asiatic lion which is in most of our mythology. It's the Asiatic lion that was on the Barbary coast. That's the lion that the Romans used in their amphitheaters for the most part. It was also out in the Middle East, Asia, Europe. The Greek myths all have to do with the Asiatic lion rather than the African lion. Now, that's interesting because, you see, the African lion is believed to be the original lion, the basal lion. And lions are thought to have gotten out of Africa maybe 20,000 years ago. Now, what that means is that people left Africa before the lions did. The lions have a very hard time getting through the tropical areas, and they had a hard time getting through the Sahara Desert and the Rift Valley. And that tends to keep the African lions trapped in Africa. But those that got out were very populous at one time. However, about 100 years ago, there were only about 10 left, and they were all in the Gir Forest. It's only because of the local nobility that set aside this area for the lions when they realized that this was the only place you could find Asiatic lions, that the lions had a chance of avoiding extinction, and they're still quite close to it. Let's start with a train ride that goes through the Gir Forest. You don't see a whole lot of animals from the train, but they're there. In fact, they happen to be right there at the train station. And as soon as the train's gone, the langur monkeys come out and become visible. The langurs are a large monkey, old world monkey, and they have a black face, and they're sometimes called black-faced monkeys. But they always remind me of old men because of their white fur. Their beards and their hair appear to be white, and they have the very bushy eyebrows. They look kind of like they should be college professors. But notice here, the langurs are not alone. They are in fact part of a, well, you could call it a mixed herd. The chital, the small spotted deer, is also often found with the langurs. Now there is a good reason for that. One is the langurs can go up into the trees and pick fruit, and they're frankly messy eaters. And so the deer like to be eating under the trees where the monkeys are working to pick up the leftovers. The other reason is because they make a good anti-predator team. The chital can smell the predator quite well. And the result of that is that it is frequently the first to give an alarm call. But the langur can give an alarm call usually only if it sees the predator, and therefore it's more reliable. The train is interesting, but by far the better way to see the animals in the Gir Forest is by the traditional safari vehicle. And so we're up at dawn, actually a little before dawn, and going into the park. One of the things that you notice pretty quickly is that there are domesticated animals like these water buffalo in the park. And in fact, there are indigenous people that are living inside the park. This is an indigenous village, and it's built basically around a large corral. When the animals, the domesticated animals, are out and about during the day, they're brought in for the night to protect them from the predators. Here we have a monitor lizard. Monitor lizards have very thick necks. Those neck muscles are how it breathes. They act kind of like a bellows into the lungs. Also, when I was a kid, there were only two venomous lizards, the Gila monster and the Mexican beaded lizard. Now we know that all the monitor lizards as well are venomous. Next is an animal I haven't seen in 25 years, and then I only saw it briefly and not well. It's a nilgai, known in English as a blue bull. The male is blue in the same sense that a horse tends to be blue, and it is India's largest antelope. In fact, I think it's taller than the African eland, although it's not as heavy as an African eland. These nilgai, of course, are female and therefore not really blue. It may look here like someone has been careless with matches or something. But this isn't really a forest fire, although it is in a forest and it is a fire. This is a controlled burn, what they use to clean up the forest and keep a serious fire from getting started. Now this is what we've come for, the Asiatic male lions. And they're strolling down the road as though they owned it, and in fact they do. You can tell that they're Asiatic lions because of that fold of skin underneath their bellies. And they're followed by paparazzi. This next is a courting couple, and you can tell that she's pretty enthusiastic. He's not quite so enthusiastic about courting right now. And this next thing that you'll see is called a flamen response. That is, he's trying to check to see whether or not she's ready. And apparently, he doesn't believe she's ready to conceive as much as she does. This is terribly hard work for the male apparently. They have to couple about 100 times on average for each cub that is produced. Normally they should be coupling every 5 or 10 minutes, but it's just not happening. Now here's a mom that's got 3 cubs that she's coming home to, and they're just about to greet her. She picks up the kids and they're headed off to the watering hole. That little squeak that you hear every once in a while is a cheetah uh, predator warning. Since cubs are one of the cutest little fur balls around, I thought that I'd basically stop talking or slow down talking anyway and let you watch them for a while.
तरह मिलना मुश्किल है। स्टार्टिंग पहली बार लेके निकले ना बाहर, तब नज़ारा था दूर से खल्लास। कितने महीने का मालूम है? पौने 2 महीने। मस्त मस्त इधर आता तुझे क्या कर रहे थे? ये नज़ारा देखो, तो खेल कूद चालू हो गया। ना सीख रहा है मार्किंग करना। देखो कम से कम खाने पीने में 20 या 25 मिनट उनको जुबान पे पानी ये नुकीले दांत वाले होते हैं ना, सब नुकीले दांत वाले शिकारी नहीं, वो अपनी जबान पे पानी पीते हैं। चपटे दांत वाले होते हैं ना, वो सीधा मुँह से पानी दर्शी नहीं टाइम अच्छे किया सवारे पीछू आता नहीं पिए बस। माता जी ने फैसला करवाने से शांति आले देवी जाए।
Well, once you're getting tired of playing Kill Your Siblings, it's time to play Kill Mom.
तो आजा आधा आ गया तुम्हारे पछाड़ी नहीं गया ना पछाड़ी नहीं गया।
And it looks now like the milk bar is about ready to open. Now that Mom's had enough to drink anyway. It's evening, and a sambar deer, which is larger than the chital deer, is walking nervously around a watering hole. There's something wrong. Then there's a little cat face at the watering hole. This is a young leopard. The leopard hasn't come down to stalk the sambar deer. It is instead also here for a drink. Nevertheless, the sandbar deer decides discretion is the better part and leaves the neighborhood. There are nearly as many leopards here as there are lions, but you never see them. The leopard is the prince of darkness, and unlike the lion, he hates to be seen. Between the light fading and the fact that we have to stand far off in order to be able to view the leopard at all, these pictures are a little grainier than I would like. Now with light fading, we need to change our attention from the Gir Forest to the foothills of the Himalaya mountains, which is our main objective. We're going to India now. Specifically, we're going to the far north, to the foothills of the Himalaya mountains. And one of the things that you're going to notice is that there's a series of ridges that you have to cross in order to get up into the mountains. Those mountains are the barrier between China and India. China's in the north, Nepal is going to be to the east, and Pakistan to the west. We're headed for that red dot, Nainital, because that's where Jim Corbett lived. When I was a boy, I was in junior high school. I read a short story by Jim Corbett. Now, at that time, Jim Corbett was the best known tiger hunter in the world. As a matter of fact, he was probably the best known man-eating cat hunter in the world. But that was about a century ago. And so I'm going to need to go back and review some of the stuff with you, because you probably don't know about Jim Corbett. Jim Corbett was third generation Irish in India. He grew up in India. He knew it quite well. And the local Indians had taught him everything that they knew about jungle lore. And so Jim Corbett was particularly well suited to be a hunter. As a matter of fact, when the British Raj wanted to stage large hunting events for the local visitors, or for the governor of India, the viceroy, they might go up and ask him to set up the hunt. He was that famous. And that's not really what made him famous. Hunting on the back of an elephant after tigers is one thing, but Jim Corbett usually didn't do that. He went after man-eaters specifically because they were bothering the local people, and he needed to put them out of the way. One of the first ones that he put out of the way was the Champawat tiger. And there's a series of books that Jim writes, and this is one of them. And I'm going to read you a little bit from the book so that you get a feel for what he's doing. While I was hunting the Champawat man-eater in 1907, I heard of a man-eating leopard that was terrorizing the inhabitants of villages on the eastern border of the Mora district. This leopard, about which questions were asked in the House of Commons, the British House of Commons, was known under several names, and it was credited with having killed 400 human beings. I knew the animal under the name of Panwar man-eater, and I shall therefore use that name for the purpose of my story. And then he goes on to say, when therefore these two animals, that is the Champawat tiger and this leopard, who between them killed 836 human beings, made their appearance, the government was forced with a difficult situation. And the reason the government was forced with a difficult situation was because no hunter had been able to kill these two animals. I'm focusing now on the Champawat tiger. The tigress, for which the animal turned out to be, had arrived in Kuman, that's the district that Jim lived in, was a full-fledged man-eater from Nepal. In Nepal, she had eaten about 200 people, apparently. And the Nepalese army was called out in order to flush her out of her home range, and that's why she went over to India. During the 4 years that she had been operating in Kuman, had added 234 to this number. In other words, he's crediting her with over 400 human beings being killed. Now, these two cats weren't the only ones that Jim Corbett killed. He killed a number of them, and together it was something over 1,000 people that they ate. Of course, the records are not terribly good in this period, and so we don't really know how many people they killed. Jim does make several interesting observations. One is that tigers, once they become man-eaters, only kill humans in the daylight. Now, this makes a certain amount of sense because tigers are not afraid of people once they've killed a few, and more people are out in the daylight than at night. Leopards, on the other hand, never lose their fear of human beings, and the result of that is that they kill humans at night. Now, one other thing that Jim points out is that usually when you get a man-eater, there's a reason for it. And that reason is usually because that animal has been injured. I've got a little quote here. A post-mortem on the tigress, that is the Champawat tigress, showed the upper and lower canine teeth on the right side of her mouth were broken. The upper one in half and the lower one down to the bone. This injury, a result of an old gunshot, according to Corbett, and Jim Corbett thinks that people that hunt tigers and wound them is usually why they become man-eaters, probably prevented her from hunting her natural prey, and hence she started to hunt humans. Unlike the classic tiger hunters of India, Jim Corbett tended to hunt his man-eaters on foot and mostly alone.
None knows better than I that the hunting of tigers on foot is not a popular sport, and that the hunting of man-eaters on foot is even less so. I searched fruitlessly for a month, wandering through the jungles from dawn to dusk, far from the nearest human dwelling. I had no definite knowledge of the man-eater's whereabouts. She might have been 50 miles away, or she might have been watching me from a distance of 50 yards. Only those who have walked in fear of having the teeth of a tiger meet in their throat will have any idea of the effect on one's nerves of days and weeks spent stalking a hungry beast which has declared itself your enemy. Through the ensuing days, I tried every trick I had learnt in a lifetime in the jungle to outwit her, always knowing that she might be just beyond the next turn in the path. My sixth sense told me that she was watching and following me. I'd been along this gully many times, but this was the first occasion on which I hesitated to pass. My instincts told me of the presence of the tiger. There was nothing for it but cautiously to retrace my own steps. I did not find the tigress, but I found her fresh pug marks over my footprints. I realized then how nearly the thread on which my life hung had been cut.
In addition to hunting the animals, Jim Corbett was also interested in passing along his information about animals in India. He wrote a book called Jungle Lore. It's a small book, you can read it pretty quickly, but it tells you all kinds of things. One of the things that it tells you is he could tell not only what the animals were saying when they were talking back and forth in the jungle, but he could mimic them to a large extent. In addition, one of the things that he could say that I found surprising was that he could tell by the track of a snake whether it was likely to be poisonous or non-poisonous, and he tells you how to do that in the book. And like I said, he was happy to pass that information along. He was so good at calling tigers and leopards that the animals, of course, couldn't tell the difference. One time he was calling in a man-eating leopard and that was a male, and there was a female that came up behind Jim Corbett, and the male and the female found each other, and they had a wonderful time, but Jim never got his shot at the male man-eater.
You come and sit down, please. Animals in their natural environment don't kill wantonly. Only we do that. Someone switch the light off, please. You'll have joy all around you. You recognize birds and animals by their calls. When I was your age, I used to mimic most of the jungle creatures. Using my ears has often helped me as a hunter. Now, a leopard calls like this. If you answer his call, he'll come to find you. Now, a chital deer barks like this when a leopard is around. Warning to the herd. Langur chatters like this. Beefowl calls to a tiger. Now, I am a tiger, calling to a tigress in the mating season across the hills.
Jim Corbett not only wrote about animals, wild animals in India, but he also wrote a book called My India about villagers in his neighborhood that he knew personally. And he told a lot of different stories, one of which was about an old poacher that he knew. And that old poacher had taught him a lot of his jungle lore. But this story is about the poacher, not about the jungle lore.
Jim bought the village of Choti Halwani in 1915. The place was practically derelict, but he has set to work to remedy this, enclosing the village little by little with a masonry wall. He himself helps with clearing and irrigating the land. He has new houses built and old ones renovated. And gradually, the village is developing into one of the best in this part of the country.
Carpet Sahab, I need some new chana. Grass is not growing in my field.
That's because of the lantana, Ram Singh. Burn the lantana and the grass will grow. You want some matches? I brought some new seed, good seed, barley. That's for everybody, you understand?
Yes, sir, for everybody.
Choti Haldwani has been our second home since we were children. We've always felt part of the village and close to our neighboring families, particularly Jim, who prefers to sleep in a tent in the garden.
Ah, Bahadur.
What is that?
It's a cinematograph camera. What is the news?
What is cinematograph?
It's like the cinema.
It will take moving pictures?
Yes. What is the news? What has been happening here this past month?
Everything is very quiet, Corbett Sahib. All as usual, peaceful, hard work. But your old friend Kumar Singh is dying.
Of what?
Well, you know, he has been taking opium. As you sow, so shall you reap.
He used to be the best poacher in the forest. When I was a boy, living here, he taught me all about the jungle. You should live to a good old age, not be put out to die. Jaldi. What's all this superstitious rubbish going on here? It's clear Bhagavan, eh? I won't have it. Come in, sir.
He's thinking his father will die.
Nonsense.
चलो भागो यहाँ से सांप तो बहुत गुस्से में लगते हैं.
What are they doing to him? Get these people out, Bahadur. Bring me 2 seers of warm milk. Come on, Jello. Now, make these people go home, Bahadur. Quickly now, ciao. Gently, my old friend. Don't worry. I'm here now. Be quiet! Make those people go home, Bahadur.
अब आप लोग घर चल हैं? सब अपने घर जाओ, ठीक है?
So, times have changed, Uncle. So have you. There was a time when no man would have dared take you from your home to die like a beggar. You wouldn't listen to our warning. And now the vile drug has brought you to this. But you're not going to die, my old friend. You're going to live for many years. But first, you're going to promise on the head of your son that you'll never more touch the filthy drug. And this time you're going to keep your promise. Or not come to save you again. Huh? Now, while we wait for the warm milk, you smoke.
How can a dying man smoke cigarette, Corbett, sir?
There'll be no more talk of dying, because you're not going to. That's why I will smoke. Pour some in there. Right. Your father is better. You stay with him all night. Let nobody else in. Every time he wakes, you give him some more warm milk. Someday. Now, you must sleep, Uncle. Cha-cha. Fresh air in the forest. tomorrow. If I find him dead, I'll burn down the village. I remember showing Gunwar Singh my first old gun when I was a boy. He said, "Now you are a man. With that gun, you can go into the jungle and never be afraid. Provided you know how to climb trees." He taught me that too.
I don't think Kumar Singh will touch opium again.
So we're headed for Jim Corbett National Park. It's the oldest national park in India, and it was established in 1936 under the name Haley National Park. Now that's because at that time, Sir Malcolm Haley was the governor of the United Provinces. The United Provinces were the forerunner of the current state of India that contains the Corbett National Park. But the reserve was renamed after independence in 1955 or 56 as Corbett National Park. And the reason is because Jim Corbett was largely responsible for establishing or having the park established, and he was very much involved in conservation in other places. And of course, the local people really loved Jim Corbett. They remembered him well. Nainital, where Jim Corbett's house was, and still is for that matter, is where the red arrow is located. The blue arrow is to Jim Corbett National Park. That's where that green mass is located. So how did the British get their hands on the land that would later become the Jim Corbett National Park? Well, it goes back to the days when the British in India were the East Indian Company rather than the British government. And some of the local nobility, the Indian nobility, turned over some of this land to the East India Company in return for their assistance in ousting the Gurkhas from this area. You remember the Gurkhas. They're the folks that traditionally lived up in the Nepali region, up in the mountains. And the British were so impressed by the Gurkhas that they turned them into whole regiments of British troops from time to time, and I believe that they still do. If you don't know them from that, at least you know them from the movies.
Bloody cheek. Where's their gratitude?
I say there. Are you Englishmen, please?
Son the bleeding crows. Yes, mate. And who might you be? It's a Gurkha.
Rifleman Machendra Bahadur Gurung, known to my regiment as Billy Fish.
By about the time of the American Civil War, the British had thoroughly occupied this area. As a matter of fact, they found it particularly useful because it was much cooler than parts of India that they had been experiencing. In the summer, the British Army tended to move from the plains, where it got quite hot during the summer, up into the areas in the Himalayas where they had hill forts. Nainital was one of those hill forts that was popular. Usually, the ladies that were accompanying the officers of the British Army went up to Nainital first, and then later their husbands arrived. And this created a very interesting situation. The ladies of the British Army became notorious for having affairs up in Nainital because their husbands had not accompanied them there yet. Rudyard Kipling wrote the story of the Gatsbys, and in it there's an exchange. Curtis speaks first. There's something in that. It was slightly noticeable now that you come to mention it, but she's at Nainital, and he's at Simla, Anthony. He had to go to Simla to look after a globe-trotting relative of his, a person with a title, uncle or aunt, Blaney. And there he got engaged. No law prevents a man growing tired of a woman, Anthony, except that he mustn't do it until the woman is tired of him. And the Harriet woman was not that. Curtis. She may be now. 2 months at Nainital works wonders. Jim Corbett lived in the Nainital area. In fact, he had several houses, summer houses, winter houses, and so forth. And he had grown up in that area, so he knew it quite well. But we're going to be coming back to Nainital later. Right now, we're going over to Corbett. Corbett is a beautiful park, famous for its tigers. We'll be coming back to the tigers later, but first I'd like to start with something I hadn't seen before too much with elephants. Usually, the way that you see an elephant in Indian National Park is as a working elephant, kind of like this one. This one is on patrol duty. You use elephants to patrol in this area because tigers are unlikely to try to take somebody off the top of an elephant. Elephants are just too intimidating. But Corbett's different. Corbett actually has wild elephants, and these are some actual wild elephants, not domesticated. Now here's a young bull elephant. He's on one side of a stream and I'm on the other, but I'm not alone. I've got a string of safari vehicles behind me, and he sees those safari vehicles and he really doesn't want to deal with them. So he starts to head uphill. Now, elephants do not go uphill well, and so he's finding that a fairly difficult task. And he starts going laterally along the side of the hill. But watch what happens. Oh, decisions, decisions. Now that is what I've never seen before. It looks like he could end up tumbling down the side of the hill. It rains a lot in Corbett. It's closed for about 5 months out of the year because of rain. But this is not the rainy season. Nevertheless, we have rain. Now elephants do just fine in the rain, so that's not what is surprising. Don't move. Don't move. Don't move. What I want you to do is to watch this bull elephant. The reason is because he's going to slip in the mud and fall. Now that I've never seen. This is one of three brothers. They're about 3 years old or so, and they haven't really sorted out their territory yet. This one is a little bit smaller than one of the other brothers. The one that he is most similar to is about his same size. But they haven't sorted out their territory, and this one is sniffing around a great deal, and I'm not sure what he's smelling for. Cats cannot smell very well, not better than people. He might be smelling for his brother, or maybe he's smelling for newborn cheetah calves they've just recently dropped. It's a little hard to say. Their mother was getting on in years, and so she's bequeathed this property to her daughter, and she has left the area. We're not sure where she is now. This is the other brother that is about the size of the first tiger that we saw. In the distance there is where I'm sleeping. This cat appears to be checking where someone else has been marking their territory. Perhaps he's smelling his brother, or one of his brothers anyway. I told you that I was coming back to where Jim Corbett lived. This is, in fact, his house. It's still essentially the same, on the outside at least, as it was when he lived there. It's a museum now, however. Next door to his old property is the village that he built, and there's also a souvenir shop that says it's Modi's Souvenir Shop. Now, Modi is important to the stories because Modi was a friend of Jim's. When Modi was about 14 years old, his father died, and so he had to form his own family, and he called his 12-year-old bride to live with him and help to develop the property. As a practical matter, Jim took Modi on sort of as a son. Unlike most of the other buildings in the village, Modi's house was built by Jim out of the same kind of blocks that Jim's own house was constructed. Incidentally, Modi's descendants still live in the house, and I met some of them. Now, the village was surrounded by jungle, and the jungle was full of wild animals, and so people had a problem with that because their gardens were just outside their houses, and the animals would come in at night and raid them. And so Jim took to building a wall all around the village, a wall that ran for miles. At first it was a low stone wall, but it gradually got higher. And part of the reason for that was because of Modi's wife. Modi's wife had a very sharp tongue, And one day a pig climbed over the wall and started destroying their garden. And Modi's wife discovered it, and she gave Modi down the road, and she started complaining about Jim and why the wall wasn't higher and so forth and so on. And so Jim and Modi had to go out hunting the pig. She referred to the pig as Shaitani, which is derived from the same word that we get our word Satan from. In an event, they went out hunting after the pig she called Satan. Eventually they run into a tiger, and the story changes. That's interesting because there's no resolution on the pig in the story. So I asked Modi's grandson, whatever happened to the pig? And apparently his grandmother never got satisfaction. The pig was never killed and continued to raid the garden. Jim may have been a wonderful tiger and leopard hunter, but apparently he wasn't very keen on killing pigs. The water system that the British put in well over a century ago seems to still be working just fine. This is where the girls used to come to take their bath. There's a series of steps down into the canal that you can take. And this is where one of my favorite stories gets started. It involves Jim when he was a little boy. Jim Corbett was at one time part of a group of kids from two families. There were 7 boys and 7 girls in the group, and he was the youngest boy of that group. And so when it came time for the girls to take a bath, someone had to stand guard on the girls to warn them if some man was coming by. And because Jim was the youngest person in that group, youngest male in that group, he was selected to guard the girls. This, of course, is a horrible embarrassment to a boy, but it turns out for Jim, it had some benefits. Now, Jim had one really big advantage because he was with the girls. That is, he heard their gossip all the time. And it turns out that there were 2 Irishmen that were trying to court them. One was named Neil, and he was too full of himself, and the other one was Darcy, and he was a bit shy. And so the girls thought they would even the score a little bit. They would take Neil down a peg. And the way they were going to do that is they were going to dress Darcy in a bear suit and put him back here in this brush. And Neil, now when he was through working with Tom, Jim's brother, he would come down this road, and as he turned this bend, Darcy would pop up in the bearskin and frighten him. That was the plan. What actually happened was that Tom did keep Neil at work a little extra long, and so by the time that he's coming down this way, it's already starting to get dark. And Neil is a little bit afraid of the jungle, and so he's singing Killarney at the top of his voice. And he does come around the bend, and he has a rifle that Tom has given him. And Darcy pops up in the bearskin and growls. And Neil is frightened, and he shoots him with the rifle, and the bear goes tumbling down the side of the road. Neil goes off to find the girls. He does find them, and he tells them that he's killed this bear. And of course, the girls are very concerned about Darcy, and they wonder what's happened to him. And they all come down the road, and Neil goes looking for the bear, and he discovers Darcy in a bearskin. But Darcy, even though he was hit with the force of the blast in the chest, he's not hurt. He's not hurt by anything, even falling down. And the girls then, when Tom comes home, they get hold of him and they complain about him giving someone like Neil a rifle to take with him because he was not a reliable person. And Tom just laughs. You see, what Tom had done was he suspected that there was going to be some kind of joke being played. So he gave Neil the rifle, but the cartridges in it were blanks. The bullets had been pulled out and they had been stuffed with flour. And so there was a lot of smoke, but no bullet came out. And so Darcy was perfectly safe. That's one of my favorite stories that you can find in Jim Corbett's book on basically jungle folklore and things like that. He also wrote another book, My India. Both of them are good reading. One of the sites that I visited was where Jim Corbett killed the Polgar tiger. This is the location. And he took a photograph here, and the photograph fits pretty well, although the tree under which he put the tiger has changed a bit in the last 100 years. Nonetheless, I went to this particular site for a very interesting reason, and that is I couldn't go where the original itinerary sent me. It was on a trail called the Man-eating Mohan Trail. Mohan is not a particularly interesting tiger in itself, but the reason why I wasn't able to get on the trail is interesting. You see, there's a man-eating tigress patrolling that area right now. Apparently last summer she had 3 cubs. I say 3 because 2 of them have been scarfed up. And she took a motorist off of his motorcycle and killed him and ate him and wounded another. The fact is, this is not all that unusual. In December, there were 2 incidents nearby where tigers killed people. This sort of thing happens fairly regularly. Jim Corbett was so famous that in the 1940s and 50s, Hollywood came out and made a movie of his exploits hunting tigers. Now, the reality is it's not a particularly good movie, and Jim himself said that the best actor was the tiger.
leopards we get from India.
Good. Avatar.
Hullabaloo!
Yoga.
Doolally.
Sure.
Loot.
Mother!
Kashmir. Pashmina. Parka. Fuck!
Nirvana.
We're going back 100 million years now to see just exactly how it was that the Himalaya mountains arose. As Gondwana land broke up, we see India and Madagascar in the center of this map, forming islands between, well, basically what is Australia and Antarctica on one side and Africa on the other. Madagascar splits from India, and it's about this time that we see the Deccan Traps beginning their volcanic activity, and the Shiva crater gets formed. It's about this time that India accelerates towards Asia. The dinosaurs are gone now, and India is speeding towards Asia, and it's just about ready to hit. India moves towards Asia, striking it at about 45 million years ago, and it begins to subduct, that is, go underneath the Asian continent. Now this has some fairly significant effects. For one thing, it starts to push up the Himalayas, but in addition to that, it's also elevating the Tibetan Plateau. And this is not an isolated event, because if you look over towards Europe, you'll see that essentially the same thing is happening along a very long line. From the Alps all the way out to Southeast Asia, there are mountains being built up by continents that are moving to the north and smashing into Eurasia. All in all, about 2,000 kilometers of the Indian subcontinent is lost to the collision with Asia. About 50% of that loss, it goes into building up the Himalaya Mountains and the Tibetan Plateau, and another 50% goes into forcing China and Mongolia a little bit further to the east. At the point where the Indian plate is underneath the Asian plate, the thickness of the Earth is roughly twice its normal thickness, about 60 to 70 kilometers thick. Now, all that mountain building does have an impact on the weather. First of all, the rainfall starts to weather the mountains down a little bit. The rainfall is slightly acid. The result of that is that some of the minerals are picked up in the water as it heads out to the ocean. A lot of the salt, about 25% of all the salt that's going into the oceans is coming from rivers that were formed as a result of the collision between India and Asia. The rainwater forms a kind of carbonic acid, and that's partly what's doing the dissolving. But that formation of carbonic acid is reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is going to have an impact on the temperature of the Earth. As you're about to see, the temperature of the Earth has generally been much higher than it has been recently. The last 50 million years or so, it's been quite cool compared to previous temperatures. And one of the things that you can note is that the temperature drops pretty significantly at about 45 million years ago, at about the time when India struck Asia. So that means that if you're interested in stopping global warming and reversing it, all you have to do is to slam another continent into Asia and build up a huge mountain chain, and that should take care of your problem. We're in Nepal, headed for Mount Everest, but first, from Kathmandu, I'd like to take the cable car up to a mountain and then look around the old town. The cable car is actually made in Austria, and it looks extremely sturdy, so I have a lot of confidence in this one. Once at the top, I discovered that we were celebrating a festival, a religious festival of some kind, but I'm not entirely clear on just exactly what the festival is or what it's for. Nepal is a very religious place. There are shrines and temples everywhere, and people do visit them on a fairly regular basis for as far as I can tell. In fact, a very regular basis. This is the prayer wheel that you normally associate with Tibet. As you spin the wheel, the prayers that are inscribed on the wheel are sent directly to heaven. And this temple reminds me so much of St. Mark's in Venice. It has the pigeons, and there's even a lion on a pedestal, the symbol for St. Mark's and apparently for this temple as well. And this is the palace. This was a monarchy up until just a few years ago. It's no longer a monarchy. Like old cities in Europe, the downtown streets are quite narrow. But unlike Europe, the Nepali streets are just full of electrical wires. And food is sold on just about every street, it seems. In 2015, there was a major earthquake here that left almost all the buildings badly damaged. This is an ancient fountain, but it's still in use. I'm told that they don't use the water quite so much for drinking as they do for washing. Well, this is why we're here at Kathmandu. It's for a helicopter ride from Kathmandu around Mount Everest at about base camp level. we've been flying long enough now that we're going to have to refuel. And that little village in front of us at the base of the mountain, that's where our airport is located that we're flying into. I wouldn't want to try to land an airplane there, but a helicopter's not that bad. And that's where we're going to refuel. The refueling was quick, and this is kind of a touch and go, and we're going. Well, we're landing again, but this time it's for an entirely different reason. You see, this little helicopter cannot take 5 tourists, and we have 5 tourists in the helicopter along with the pilot now, around Everest. The altitude is simply too high for this helicopter. So what we're going to do is we're going to land, and we're going to drop 3 people off, which includes me this time. And we're going to leave 2 people in the helicopter. They'll make a turn around Everest, come back, pick us up, dropping off the 2 that made the trip before, and the 3 of us will make the trip around Everest, come back to this location, pick up the other 2, and head to our next stop. As the helicopter goes out of sight, it's impossible not to think, what do you do if the helicopter doesn't come back and pick you up? It's a long walk home, and it's cold. It's not really, really cold, but it's cold. Well, come to find out, they've dropped us off on the hikers trail. The people that are going up to the summit of Mount Everest pass by along this way, and there's a trail going all the way down the mountain, and I assume back to Kathmandu, although my shoes may not make it quite that far. In any case, we ran into a couple of people that were headed up or headed down. The people that are moving left to right are headed down the mountain, and the people that are headed right to left are headed up to Everest Base Camp. By the way, it's said that there's a wildcat that might live up in these mountains called a Pallas cat, named after Pallas Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. Sure enough, though, the helicopter does come back after a few minutes. Now it's my turn. This is Everest Base Camp, and this is the way that the base camp looked to us from the helicopter after a snowfall. Then we picked up the stranded couple and headed off to our next stop. On the itinerary, it calls for breakfast. What I didn't know was the breakfast was at the cafe, which is at the highest altitude in the world. The cafe, or hotel, because it serves as both, is right on the Trekkers Trail. So it's basically your last stop before you get to Everest Base Camp. Oh, by the way, I wouldn't go to the Hotel Everest for the food. It's not that good, and it's a tad bit expensive. And that is Mount Everest. Everest Base Camp is just a little bit out of sight. After breakfast, we take off again. I am.